Welcome to the Ethics Experts, where we're elevating ethics and compliance and HR to the strategic level it's supposed to be.
Hello, everybody. This is the Ethics Experts. If it's your first time joining us, welcome. And if you are a returning subscriber, hello, bestie. Hope you're having an amazing day. You see what happens when you subscribe to the Ethics Experts? You get a bonus greeting on every single episode. So why haven't you hit that subscribe button yet? I am here with the man, Robert Shindell. How's it going, Robert?
Good. How are you doing today?
Good, man. I'm super excited to get you on here. You are the expert of all things internships and workplace culture. Internships are this really interesting thing that has kind of emerged over, I don't know, maybe they've been around forever, but it's at this interesting inflection point given everything that's going on in our country, given how education has changed over the last, several decades, and I'm pretty excited to come on and pick your brain. As we dive in, why don't you tell us a little bit about your organization and how you got to where you're at right now?
Oh, wow. I've been in and on higher education for the last 25 years. Started off, I was a career center director, and then back in 2011 took over Internbridge, which is a research and consulting firm focused in on, I know it's a shocker, internships. But we really look at internships from a very much a data perspective. Our basis, we've got a methodology that we've created called Total Internship Management that is data driven. It's amazing, in so many aspects of the business world, we say, data driven decision making. So, if you're playing that really fun game, buzzword bingo, you can, cross off that block for now. But internships was one we weren't using data. It was, my, son's roommate's girlfriend had this internship and she really liked this, so let's just do that. Mm-hmm. And it was this kind of, and a lot of times it was driven by an individual's persona. And, great, we have this awesome internship at XYZ company, and Susan runs it. Oh, Susan won the lottery and said, I'm leaving the workforce. And the internship program crashed. Why? Because it wasn't systemic to the organization. So what we do at Internbridge is help organizations to utilize the data to build systemic and really meaningful internship initiatives and programs that lead to building that bench and creating those talent pools that are so needed. We also help higher education in integrating experiential learning into the classroom. So that's another big piece. Back in 1903, a gentleman by the name of John Dewey, does that name ring a bell for you? Mm-mm. Remember Dewey Decimal System?
Oh, yeah.
Or are you too young for that one?
I saw something in the Smithsonian about it. Yeah,
exactly. Well, John Dewey was a pretty famous American educationalist, kind of sometimes known as the father of the American system of education. And one of the things that he said in 1903 was, when we eliminate the barriers between life in school and out, the whole pupil is engaged and learning occurs. And here we are 118, almost 119 years later, and we still haven't figured that out. When we remove the barriers between life in school and out. And
why don't we, that's insane. Almost 150 years, we still haven't gotten it. Why do you think that is?
I think there's a couple of reasons. I think one, higher education, which I'm also a faculty member. I teach MBA in an MBA program. I think that many of my brethren and sisters in the faculty look at what they teach in a microcosm and say, hey, what we're learning in strategic management, 599 or whatever that course number is, that's everything that somebody needs to know. They're not connecting the dots, and the students don't have many times just that requisite maturity to be able to connect the dots for themselves. And then I think that employers have really kind of abdicated some of their responsibility. They make an assumption that, oh, the schools are teaching. I remember I was doing a workshop a couple of years ago, and we were talking about, career readiness of students making this transition to the world of work. And this lady said, well, isn't that the school's responsibility to do that? And it just caught me off guard. And I kind of responded. Now I think it was kind of sarcastic and a little flippant, but I think I made the point is if you hope that somebody else develops the talent that you need in your own company, hope is not a good strategy.
Yeah. And
so, I think, again, employers really taking, I think that they have had the luxury of sitting back and saying, I'm the employer, you are the job seeker. It's your responsibility to come to me. Mm-hmm. I'm the gatekeeper. You have to do everything in order to pass my standards. So I'll let you in. And I think that companies that's changing. And many more companies now are saying, what can I do to reach students as early as I can in their educational cycle, whether it's in high school, whether it's in college, whether it's in grad school, whatever, and build that relationship and say, how can I meet you where you are to take you to where I want you to be, which is part of my workforce.
Right. It seems like big organizations. So I came out of the Big Four accounting, and that's going to be I'm going to use that as sort of a shorthand picture for these large organizations that are highly profitable, huge footprints, that largely understand that it's at some level kind of a revolving door, right? You come in, you work there for 2 to 5 years, perhaps. Like, only 20% of the people end up kind of staying for more than 10 years, or it's something kind of directionally like that. Yet they have figured out, or the light bulb is on to the extent where they have really strong internship programs, right? And you see that at a lot of these other, you see that at investment banks a lot. You see that at a lot of consulting firms and things like that.
Yep.
They have, I mean, if you boil it down, like on a straight economic basis, they have, they believe that, hey, expending these efforts, putting this program in place, paying these sort of unqualified people to, come into the organization is a net positive investment over the long term.
Yes.
Why do you think that thing, that whatever that equation is, why has that equation not been digested by, more organizations or more mid-tier organizations? Do you think it's a resource thing? Do you think like it's so big of an issue they just can't really wrap their head around it? They don't really know where to start? Where does that slippage come from, beyond or like below these sort of like top tier, massive 100,000 person organizations?
Right. I think there's a couple of different ones. One, there's a lot of companies that say, well, I'm not that huge company, I can't do an internship. Mm-hmm. But yet in the last study that we did in 2019 before the pandemic hit, 75% of the nearly 30,000 students that responded to our survey did an internship at a company less than 500 employees.
Wow.
75%. And what we are seeing is now students have choices, and they're saying, you know what, I'll go back to the accounting firms. I mean, at one time, the Big 8 and then the Big 4, I mean, it was, if you were in accounting and you didn't have an internship with one of those firms, why did you go into accounting? Yeah, I mean, a lot of people ask that question. And now students are saying, I don't want to do that. I want to go to a mid-market firm. A lot of the mid-market firms took a huge advantage of the idea of work-life balance. Mm-hmm. And really promoting the smaller work environment, promoting the mentoring. A lot of the larger firms it's burn and churn, right? You just kind of get work and you do it, but you really don't have a mentor. You don't have some of those things that really engage the learner. I think that's one of them is this resource thing, or, well, we're not big enough to do it, or we don't know where to start, or, my favorite one is, well, we did it 10 years ago and it really didn't work, so we're not going to do it again. And that's really where what we do at Internbridge, I think, comes in really handy with our employer partners that we work with. is that we provide them a framework that is based on data to help them see the internship through a different lens. For example, if I'm doing a workshop and I've got 50 employers in a room and I say, hey, I want you to all pull out a piece of paper, write down the definition of an internship and turn it in. I'm going to have 60 different responses because that word internship means so many different things to so many different people that a lot of times we get stuck on what the word means versus what we're trying to do. And we can never kind of get out of the starting gate. So we look at the internship and we try to change the narrative a little bit. So instead of how do we create an internship, we change that statement to say, how can we as an employer create an experience of value, an experience that of value for this young professional making their transition in the world of work, but also an experience of value for us, that we're seeing some return on the investment that we're making in developing a talent pool. Because let's face it, talent is hard to come by. Yeah. And, one of the analogies that we use, and I'm a huge baseball fan, for better or worse, my team's the Phillies. Yeah, I know it is what it is. But when my Phillies, my beloved Phillies, draft a prospect out of high school or college, they don't send them to Citizens Bank Park up in South Philly. They send them into the minor leagues, and in the minor leagues, they just don't send them down there and say, well, why don't you go down there and throw and hit and catch and do baseball stuff. They have an individual development plan for each individual that they bring into their organization. Right. So the question is, why do they do that? Because each individual that they draft and bring into the organization is a potential investment in their future.
Right.
Now, what would happen if employers looked at talent the same way that baseball teams did and developed that individual development plan that graduated that first-time intern from single A to double A to triple A to the bigs?
So what do you think that would look like? I mean, it's a pretty interesting idea. What could that look like? Would that be a series of internships over the summer? Could it be work studies kind of throughout the year? How have you seen people kind of think outside the box and put something into practice?
Well, it starts with understanding and defining what it is that we're trying to do. So what is this experience of value? And through our research, we've been able to delineate a really solid internship and experiential learning programs. They have four main components. The first component is that they transmit the organizational culture. Right? What does that mean? You're bringing somebody into your culture. So the transmitting our culture means who we are, what we do, why we do it, why it's important, how we do it, how we treat each other, what's the culture of the organization, and how we transmit it. And what was really interesting about that first kind of area that we focus on with employers is when the pandemic hit. Because so many employers thought, well, they get our culture because they're in the building or they're in the office. And then when many companies went virtual with their internship initiatives. I remember working with this one group and they said, well, how are we going to transmit our culture when they're not in our office? Yeah. And, just like a good professor, I answered a question with a question. And I said, well, what elements of your culture do you want to transmit? Crickets. And it forced us to really look at, okay, what is our culture? What makes us unique, special, and different? We throw the word culture out all the time, but what is that? And then once we know what it is, we can say, oh, okay, here's how we can transmit that to this new person coming into our organization.
And that exercise almost forces you to be more intentional about the transmission of that culture as opposed to just kind of hands off. Well, hey, you just kind of steep in it. You just walk into the office and you're just going to absorb it. It makes you kind of dial in the recipe and the elements of it, to your point, that you want to make sure transmit, which again makes you kind of deconstruct what makes your culture unique. What are these actual pillars that kind of stand up this building that is our culture?
Yep. So the second, we'll call it the second pillar of really good internship and experiential learning programs from an employer standpoint is professional development. Every organization out there has certain skills that are needed in their particular workplace. Whether it is, there's hard skills in an accounting firm or an IT firm, but there's also those, I hate to call them soft skills because they're not soft. Right. They are business critical skills, communication, leadership, diversity and inclusive. I mean, those types of things that's professional development. Now, how do we deliver that? And again, that's coming back to the employer saying, you know what, I'm not going to make an assumption that they are learning this somewhere else that's going to benefit me. I'm going to, engage my learning and development team and say, what are the skills that help somebody be successful in this company? And then we're going to develop some training. And interestingly enough, the number one benefit that new hires are looking for today is more training and development. So it really falls in line with what recent graduates and what interns are looking for from their employer. They're looking for employers to say, okay, I want to come in, but train me. I want to learn. And I think that's one of the really good things that higher ed has done. And even in high schools have created this culture of lifelong learning and this ability and desire to want to learn and how important that is. So that's the second pillar is, coming up with that, delivery mechanism for professional development to help transition this young person into your organization. And what are the specific skills in your industry or your company that they really need to know? The third pillar is meaningful work. And this goes back to the old, I was an intern. Oh, what'd you do? Well, I got coffee for people. I made copies. I ran errands. You hear those types of horror stories. Ross Perlin back in, I think it was the early 2000s, wrote a book called Intern Nation, where he talked about, unpaid internships. And, we could spend a whole hour talking about the ethical and moral wrongness of unpaid internships. But, now students are saying, well, no, I'm not going to do that. I think employers are seeing, it's worth the investment to pay an intern, X number of dollars an hour for X number of weeks because I'm getting more out of it as an employer. So really focusing on that meaningful work. How is it developmental in nature? I mean, even if it's something that we might consider menial. So for example, hey, intern Susie, I need you to enter data from these 3 points into one spreadsheet. Okay, that might seem a little menial, but when you connect it to something bigger and give them the why, oh, well, Susie, you're going to enter this data into these spreadsheets because we're going to use this spreadsheet combined with these other 2 things to do this presentation for the board of directors at our upcoming quarterly meeting. And all of a sudden, that entering of data into a spreadsheet becomes something much bigger. Right. I'm connected to it. It's more personal for me. I feel like I'm doing more than just entering data into a spreadsheet. I'm helping to prepare for the quarterly meeting to the board of trustees or the board of directors. So meaningful work is making it reflective of what work would be like if I came there to work full time. The last pillar, and I think it's the one that pulls all of those 3 together, is effective mentoring. Having a dedicated mentor to help be that Sherpa for that student, to guide them through this process and help them to reflect on it. Meeting with them once a week and saying, hey, you worked on that, you're working on that spreadsheet. What was important about that? What did you learn from it? Why do you think that's important? Hey, you went to that meeting the other day. Tell me what you saw. Like, reflect on that. How can we do things better? Though that mentoring ties the professional development, it ties the cultural transmission, it ties the meaningful work all together. So what we try to do at Internbridge is help employers see that if they focus on those 4 areas and say, hey, every week we're going to do something about cultural transmission. We're going to have some professional development. We're going to have some meaningful work, and we're going to mentor. All of a sudden, we have a very well balanced and we have a very practical delivery mechanism for an internship. And I can do that if I have 1,000 interns or I have 1. So it's scalable and it's easy to understand. The employers that come to our workshops, the emails that we get back is, I now see this through a different lens. I understand now how this is really valuable to the student and helping them. And, the more that we can do that, it attacks so many of the other issues that are plaguing students as they're making the transition to the world of work. We hear about the billions of dollars of student debt. Well, what happens when a student graduates with a job in hand? They start paying those student loans back easier and more effectively and more efficiently. Not having that job upon graduation, it becomes kind of this window that keeps shutting. And then all of a sudden you're 6 months out, you still don't have a job, you're still applying. But, as an employer, I might be looking at your resume and going, well, you don't have a job after, what's wrong with you?
Yeah. And never mind the psychological toll it takes on the young person coming out of school.
Right.
I mean, it's really a big deal.
It is.
Remember, this is going to be a crude analogy, but, it's kind of a compound interest analogy, and what a difference it makes, even a 10-year difference in putting the same amount of money in and having the same, annual return can have exponential difference, down the road. It's all about kind of how soon you start, and things like that. So
absolutely,
as that window extends, it gets increasingly hard for folks. There's a psychological aspect of it. There's headwinds that come, to your point, from, a perceived what's wrong with this guy or gal because they haven't been working. Why couldn't they? When I got out of school, I had a job immediately. What's wrong with this person, right? It's hard to put ourselves as employers into the shoes of folks whose reality is much different. And it can have some really big knock-on effects across our economy, and I think we're seeing them.
Yeah, we are. And there's a lot of, again, influencers to that. For example, we are seeing a rate of students moving home after graduation where mom and dad are saying, hey, you know what? You just finished 4 or 5 years of college. Why don't you just take a break? Come home, live with us. And that is actually a detriment to the student because, I totally believe it is. I remember, I went to the University of Toledo, graduated in 1995, started in 1990. I remember the first time I went home, Thanksgiving, right? And I walk up to what was my bedroom. I opened the door and it was my mom's craft room.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Mom, what's going on? She's like, oh, we put your stuff in the spare bedroom, blah, blah. And, but the message that was sent was, this is always going to be your home. You can always come back, but you're a guest. When you graduate, and it was funny because all of my friends that I went through school with, I think our parents all got together and did the same thing.
Like, let's get into crafting.
Yeah, let's get into crafting and move our kids' rooms into the guest room because that sends a real clear message that, you know what, you can come back, but you're a guest. And the interesting thing about, even more interesting, is that all of us had jobs 6 months to a year before we graduated because we knew we couldn't go home.
Interesting. That's super interesting. So what's the strong force there? Is it the economy? Was it the job placement services at, your college? Was it the move your parents did that implicitly, subconsciously sent a message to you that you better get a job? I mean,
too many variables to track one down, but I can't help but think that it was part of this feeling like I like literature. I'm a big Thomas Wolfe fan. You can never go home again. Right. So but it sent this clear message that, I can come back and visit, but I don't live there anymore. And it's kind of like that mama bird putting that baby bird up on the edge of the nest and pushing them out and saying, you got to fly. Yeah. And, I look back on that now as being a tremendous value to me as a young professional. I was hungry. I wanted to get out. We don't see that to the same level as we do today. But I think with internships, the more the students that do internships, and as a professor, I see the difference the minute that they come back after an internship.
Totally. I remember. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
They're
back,
like,
they have a different posture almost, you know?
I know within about 10 seconds of a student walking into my classroom, and again, pre-pandemic when we were still meeting in class, but within 10 seconds, just the way that they even dressed for class,
totally.
The way that they came in, the way that they prepared themselves. And then in their first assignment, what experiences they wrote about and how they are able to engage. The students with internships are the first ones to raise their hand when I ask a question in the classroom. They have that confidence level that is so much higher, and it's because of that experience. So we need to double and triple the number of internships that are happening. And the only people that can do that really are companies.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about, so I love these 4 pillars. It's funny that you said that because it feels like, I remember noticing that as well. It's almost like the internship itself sort of brings the degree to life. It's like, oh, wow, yeah. I can do something with this. And it gives some more context and it gives some more sort of like longer term vision. It's like some sort of like implicit vision casting and just doing it. And you bring that back to school and you feel like more of a professional and all those kind of things. There's so many, great knock-on effects. I want to go back to what you just said, that it's really kind of on companies. And I think there's this interesting dynamic, you kind of alluded to this before, and the ethics of internships and the ethics of, unpaid internships. So it's not a binary thing, of course, like it's kind of a spectrum. So,
right.
Paying them a penny an hour, obviously, I mean, this is just stupid, but paying them a penny an hour, that's not nothing. There's some level of payment where it's kind of below that ethical level. On the other side of it, I'm just kind of, trying to kind of frame out what some of the dynamics are, I think, with respect to this aspect of an internship. At some level, you're not going to pay an intern perhaps what you would pay somebody first year out of school or somebody who has 5 years of experience or whatever. So as you're advising or talking to companies who are trying to sort of digest this pill and put themselves in the picture of kind of setting up a proper internship program, how would you have them think about this to thread the needle between, hey, this needs to sort of make economic sense both over the perhaps short and absolutely over the long term, and also I don't want to sort of be unethical and fall into this category of like, malfeasance or like bad actors or, moral hazard that can come from taking advantage of young, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed kids.
Right. That's a great way to put it, is threading the needle. One, there's a market demand and the market kind of sets the price. I mean, if you were to offer a computer science major with let's say a focus on data analytics or cybersecurity, minimum wage, you are not going to get the best and brightest because the market value for that is in the $25 to $30 an hour range. Okay. But what's interesting, our research has showed that there's no statistical difference between a student earning minimum wage or something above minimum wage in their level of satisfaction with the internship, because the motivation is not the pay. The motivation is the learning. It's the networking. It's the social capital. It is all of those other things, gaining a realistic preview of the world of work, exploring a new industry, learning new things. That's what is valuable in the internship to the student. Now, am I saying that pay is absolutely not a motivator? No, I'm not. It is. It's just not the motivator. So when companies are looking at, okay, how do I thread the needle? One of the things that I tell them is you need to pay something fair. But the more structured that your program is, the more deliberate, intentional, and dedicated you are to those 4 pillars that we talked about. And the more that you can showcase that and say, if you come here, this is what you get. Most likely you are going to get those more discerning students. You are going to get those students who say, you know what, I'm I could go work for this big company and be a number, but hey, over here, I can go to a smaller organization, get paid fairly, but I'm going to have a mentor. I'm going to have really great hands-on experience working with clients. I'm going to really get to do real work because they've shown me, examples of projects that I'm going to be working on. I'm going to get professional development. I'm going to get one of the firms that I'm working with right now, as part of their internship program, they're getting certified and going through the security clearance process for government clearance, so that when they graduate, they are ahead of their competition, their classmates, in obtaining top secret and confidential and those types of certifications.
Interesting. That's actually super interesting. I want to go back to that Dewey quote about knocking that wall down, because I think, let me just back up a little. I was really excited when I got out of school because I was ready to go, ready to be a professional. And I remember like that first month where I was like, I know freaking nothing. So, and like I went to a decent school, I got good grades, all that kind of stuff, but like I didn't really feel, or put it this way, there was a guy who was a year ahead of me, and I remember having a conversation with him. It was maybe my senior year, and he had been a year at the company that I ended up going to. He had been in there for a year, and I just remember he was just, because I was kind of picking his brain about the job and all this stuff, and just the level of fluidity, or like the dexterity he had with like the job and the way that he was talking about it. I was just like, this guy's freaking light years ahead of me, but he was only a year different. So like that first year, it's almost like you learn 10X, to your point. Yep. You learn kind of 10X what you learn back in the books and the classroom and all of that kind of stuff. And I love the idea of a summer internship, because that gives you some time to really kind of, dive deep into the pool and get some taste for it. But, if we could wave a magic wand and enact this sort of Dewey quote, or like actualize it, what do you think that would kind of look like on a, and maybe we can talk about it on a sort of general basis, or we can talk about it like in a, just as a case study, talking about a particular field of study or something. How could we knock those walls down a little bit more, and what role would companies, whether they're big or small or whatever, kind of play in that interplay between sort of the classroom and real world?
Oh my God, that is an entire field of study now, which is fantastic. And it's being attacked in a lot of different ways. So for example, the National Association of Colleges and Employers a couple of years ago brought together a lot of different people, from career center professionals to faculty to students to businesses, HR, CEO. I mean, they just went out and said, what are the competencies that individuals need as they make this transition in the world of work? And what they did is they came up with these 8 concepts and these 8 competencies. And we are now, I think, able to, like, for example, one of them is teamwork and leadership. So instead of, let's say you're in my, in my organizational development class, I could assign just for you to write a 10-page paper on compare and contrast 2 cases. That's kind of a typical assignment in a class like that. But what happens when I say, instead of a 10-page paper, I want you and 3 other of your classmates to do the same type of assignment, but I want you to work together and deliver a presentation on that. That is also experiential learning, and we're seeing much more of that in the workplace. So not only is the student engaging in teamwork, communication, presentation skills, both oral and written, they also have a final product that they could take. So I'm coming to an interview with you, and you asked me about, I don't know, when was the time that you got to work with, had a project to work on, and I could say, well, here's the project, and by the way, it's recorded, and here's the YouTube link.
Right.
So you can see me in action. Those types of things are happening much, much more.
Right.
So that's on the higher ed side. There's a good friend of mine, his name's Jeffrey Moss. He runs a company called Parker Dewey. And he came up and actually invented the concept of what he calls micro internships. And micro internships are, for example, short-term projects. Maybe I don't have enough work at my company for an intern for 10, 12, 14, 16 weeks, the length of a semester or a quarter. But I've got this one project that I just need some help on. Well, what if I post that and have students bid on that project, and I will pay $15 an hour. I think it's a 20-hour project. So he's created this platform through Parker Dewey where companies can post these types of projects, and students from all over the country can bid on them and say, yeah, I want to apply for that. And then that helps you to build your talent pool. There's one student that I visited with last year who and he started as a freshman doing this. His entire freshman and sophomore year, he did probably 15 or 20 of those projects. His junior year, he did an internship with one of those projects. He graduated in 4 years, had a job waiting for him. Why? Because he took ownership of doing these types of things, but also had the venue in order to do that. What we see a lot is students sometimes are fearful of the future. And what do we do when we're afraid of something?
Avoid it.
We ignore it.
Yeah.
It'll go away. And then all of a sudden we get to our senior year and it's, as a former Career Center director, I can't tell you how many times a student would come in the morning of graduation and say, hey, I hear this is a place you can get jobs. Or, I think it's time for me to get my resume looked at.
It's like, come on, fella.
Yeah.
You should have been talking in sophomore year, buddy.
Whoa. Yeah. So there's these opportunities that are coming up. And, the other thing is, in typical majors that don't lead to a profession. So like in engineering, that leads to a profession. Mm-hmm. A lot of times business leads to a profession. But what about the liberal arts? I'm a liberal arts graduate, and I think it's incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
But there's a gentleman by the name of Brandon Boustede who writes and talks a lot about credentials. So go to school, get that liberal arts degree, but also get a credential in coding, or get a credential in cybersecurity, or get a credential in data analytics. And so you're graduating with this amazing liberal arts degree, which means that you can process information and you can write and you can think critically and synthesize information, but you can also have these credentials to show employers. So it's being attacked. So your main question is, how do we attack it? It's getting attacked in a lot of different ways. Now can the student take advantage of it? Will the student go to Parker Dewey and sign up for those things? Will a student say, hey, I really want I want an English degree, or I really have a passion for English or history or political science, but I don't want to be a teacher. Mm-hmm. What else can I do? And how many liberal arts students have had that conversation at the Thanksgiving dinner when Uncle Joe says, "Well, what the hell are you going to do with a liberal arts degree?"
Right.
And so now we can say, "Well, I've got this degree, but I've also got these other things that make me valuable."
Right.
So when students start to think of themselves as a commodity moving into the marketplace and can ask themselves, "What makes me unique, special, and different?" And what are the things that I have in my toolbox that can help communicate to a potential employer? And we're seeing employers now saying, hey, I'm looking for an intern for our marketing department. They're now looking beyond the marketing department at the school. They're saying, well, what do we really need? Well, we need somebody who can think critically, who can write really well, who's incredibly creative. That sounds like an English major, right? Or that sounds like a fill in the blank major. So employers are now starting to expand their vision a little bit to what it is. And they're looking for individuals who fit within their culture, who are eager to learn, who want to come in, make a difference. And they're not just looking at that major anymore, which I think is a really important shift. as I mentioned earlier, the gatekeeper kind of concept of I'm the employer, you come to me, that I'm going to go and develop and build my own talent.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason that all these large companies, to your point, have continued to make or continued to perfect and build these internship programs because it gives them a first look at folks.
Yeah.
They probably have a higher confidence interval on the offers they end up giving because they've gotten sort of some, you get some sense at how smart somebody is. You get some sense at how well they fit into the culture. Do they quote unquote get it? And you probably just end up having a higher hit rate because hiring is expensive and hiring is difficult.
Yes.
And really, perhaps I'm kind of trying to sell this to, employers who may be listening. All those things that lead to kind of inefficiencies as somebody ramps up, if you can compress that, all that excess value drops right to the bottom line.
Yep.
And if we can build better talent, we can create better opportunities where someone can actually feel the resonance of the company purpose with their own purpose and so forth, and they can put down roots perhaps and stay in those opportunities longer because it's a mutually beneficial thing. There's a lot of value that can come from that.
Yeah.
When you think about the pandemic and the role that this has had on this whole internship game, you think it's a net positive? You think it's a net negative? Is it sort of too hard to say?
There's going to be a lot of research that comes out in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
A lot of my colleagues are really digging into it. I'm digging into it. One of the things that we learned, I think, is that internships are incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
Because those organizations that had internships, when the world shut down in March of 2020, there was two decisions that were made. Either we're going to scrap it or we're going to figure out how to do it. And how can we do this thing virtually? Mm-hmm. Those that did it, that's flipped to that virtual delivery mechanism, I think realized that, hey, you know what, this worked. And I think that, obviously the pandemic has significantly changed the landscape of what work looks like in this country. Mm-hmm. The hybrid work model is not going away.
Right.
I think that companies have realized that, wow, our employers are happier, they're more productive, they are, with this level of flexibility. So I think one of the positives is that it opens up the talent pool for companies. We used to, employers would look for the school down the street for interns. Now they can look for students around the country. Many students, especially students, historically underrepresented populations, students of color, many times don't have transportation to go places. They can't,
it's a big factor.
Yeah, it's a huge factor. I can't, wait a minute, I can't go to DC or New York for this because I can't afford to go there. But now with virtual internships, it levels the playing field a little bit. So I think there's some positives. I do think there's some negatives. I think that there's nothing quite like being in a new environment to learn. But I do believe that today's students are more, what's the word I'm looking for? They are better conditioned to be in this moment than any other generation before them. Yeah. If this pandemic would have happened 5-10 years ago, the technology wasn't there to be as virtual as we are today, right?
Imagine.
Oh my
I
gosh.
didn't even think about that. That's a crazy kind of thing to think about.
Yeah, even just 5 years ago, we didn't have that type of technology. And I don't think that students at that time would have been as flexible or as amenable or malleable to this new environment. So we've got students today that have been through some pretty crazy stuff that are just like, hey, whatever you throw at me, I'm gonna make it work. Oh, I can't go to class. No worries. I'll just do it online and set up a camera and talk with my professor online. Yeah.
It's almost like they're more resilient, or like you said, they're more malleable or flexible or adaptable or something. It's pretty interesting how, we're able to adapt at, what gets thrown at us. And frankly, it's been pretty interesting to see how we as a sort of society or we as an economy have also adapted in the context of it. I think there's some good opportunities, to your point, right now from the internship perspective. especially for, as you said, these underrepresented minorities who maybe who haven't had those opportunities. This could be an opportunity to, particularly through micro internships or these sort of virtual internships, to really kind of level that playing field and democratize the experience to a greater degree.
And that's we'll get back to a point that we were talking about earlier. Who can afford to do an unpaid internship?
I don't know.
Who can afford it is historically white, upper class.
Oh, yeah.
Individuals.
Because it's not like they're not, spending money. They're getting money from some other spot,
Exactly.
Yeah.
I look at it as a moral thing. I mean, if you are providing an unpaid internship, you are eliminating such a huge diversity segment because they're not going to apply because those individuals are having to work to put themselves through college. There was a couple of years ago, there was a list of individuals like the top 25 interns in journalism. And of the 25, there was only one person of color.
Well,
why? Because in journalism, unpaid internships were the norm.
Irony of ironies. Yeah.
Yes.
So as you look forward to the next 10 years, how do you think the internship game is going to change? How do you think this opportunity is going to be seized on both sides, or really, I guess, on all three sides of the fence, to break my analogy, on the university side, on the student or intern side, and on the corporate side, the providers of these opportunities? How do you think all that kind of ends up elevating or changing over time?
Well, I hope, and again, my vision and my hope is that employers will double, triple, quadruple down on internships as a way to develop their talent pool, that they, are connecting with local, and I'm not just talking college. I'm talking that skilled trades get more involved with high schools in their career and technical education, and that we create better pathways to employment. One of the mistakes that I think that we made back in the 80s is when we said everybody should go to college. That's not true. I mean, I don't know about you, but the last time that I had to write a check to a plumber, it was on a Sunday night, and that check was pretty large.
Yeah.
And then I think about what that plumber is doing, and they're running their own business, and they are, doing, they're making a living for themselves, and they have a skill that's valuable. Why did we say, implicitly or explicitly say, no, that's not good. You shouldn't go into the skilled trades. You have to go to college. But that's what we did back in the 80s and the early 90s. So I'm hoping that more and more employers connect with high schools and community colleges and help students make that transition into the world of work more effectively. So again, creating more of those pathways is certainly something that I hope we see, that they're more structured. I think that the outcome is it's a no lose for anybody.
Right.
Even if, let's say I hire 5 interns and I only hire one of them, those other 4 have an experience that they can take into another job, but they have another job. They have that experience to get that job, and they are, let's say they're staying in my community. Well, what does that do? Well, they buy homes. That increases the tax base in my community, which allows us to have better schools. That has, all of these things that the ripple effects are impacted by this simple thing called an internship.
Yeah, it's such a massive opportunity, and it's probably something that if we sort of collectively can get it right, can have such a powerful transformative effect on our entire economy and perhaps even on our entire world. It's, I think we could have kept talking for probably another hour, but this has been a lot of fun. How can people find out more about you? How can they find you? How can they learn more about your organization and your work?
Well, you can visit us at internbridge.com. Pretty simple. My email address, Robert at internbridge.com. If you type in Robert Shindell to LinkedIn, I should be at the very top because I think there's only, one or two of us. And what we do again is really help employers build a better mousetrap, help higher ed, build integrate more experiential learning into the classroom, to really help facilitate this transition, to help students make this transition to the next chapter of their lives.
Well, Robert, it's been a lot of fun. I love your work. I love the impact that you're making. I love the impact that your organization is making on the lives of students. And I'm excited to maybe get some micro internships going on our side and take that first step forward. Until next time.